Hi there. Thank you for taking time on the webinar today. And what we'll be doing over the course of this webinar right now is covering the overall SuperOps.ai product. And in that sense, we will be going through both the PSA and RMM elements. Since SuperOps is going to be a unified solution, you'll see that on the PSA side of things, we've got the tickets, tasks, projects management, as well as your client management, where you can generate your invoices, have them synced to your accounting tools. And similarly, on the RMM side of things, we have the asset management, alerts, patches, as well as IT documentation. Now, during the course of the webinar, in case you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat box, or even post the webinar if there's any questions. You can always reach out to us via email or chat. Now, getting started, let's say, going into the home screen from here. First, the home screen here is customizable. So any technician using the system can customize the home screen to make it a little bit personalized or to see the kind of relevant information they want. One good example is, let's say I'm logging into work for the day as a technician. This is going to be useful for me to see at this point in time, how many open alerts are there, for example, or has anyone mentioned me on an internal ticket, on an internal note, or if I just scroll down further, all of these widgets are again customizable, because here on the right side, you'll notice the widget library, which has information flowing from tickets, alerts, patches, as well as assets. So in case I just need to see how many alerts are open, or even, for example, how many patches are pending my approval, I can have them set up as smaller widgets so I can look into them whenever necessary. Now, going into tickets, or to start off with the ticketing side, you notice that in SuperOps, there are different ways in which tickets can be created. So tickets can, let's say, come in via email, it can be manually logged, or you can also host a system tray icon on your client's endpoints where they can raise a ticket with you. Or there's also a customer portal where you can give access to users to raise tickets, right? Now, this being said, ticketing is more of a reactive approach. That is, whenever a user or a requester or anybody from your clientele has an issue, they're probably going to reach out to you and seek your help. So in SuperOps, in addition to viewing tickets in a column-wise fashion like what you're seeing here, you can also choose to view tickets in a Kanban approach. And this is something that we also recommend, because in a Kanban view, I'd be able to group tickets by status, for example, right? Now, this is useful because on a day-to-day basis, if I need to see how many tickets are currently, let's say, in progress, right? Or how many tickets are currently in the new status, this will be easy for me to see. And I can even close off the columns that I don't want to see from the Kanban view. And I can also move over tickets from one status to another with just one drag and drop. Right? So this saves me a lot of time and gives me a bird's eye view of what is happening in the system. Now, that being said, moving on to how the ticket creation as such works. So emails can come in as tickets using a forwarding rule, or let's say I want to log a ticket on behalf of a client. Right? Let's say a client is calling me and I need to log a ticket on their behalf. So let's say I just click this create ticket button. This is going to show me a ticket form where I can simply go ahead and choose which client I'm speaking with or logging a ticket for. And one more thing that's going to make this entire process much more seamless is the form, right? Now, the form is useful in a case where, let's say, I'm creating a ticket and I need to make sure that I have all the relevant information set up. Right now, so you'll see that based on which form I'm clicking, the fields relevant to the ticket will keep changing dynamically. And this is something that can be controlled on your end. So I can probably just go give, let's say, a subject line saying, let's say, someone says they need a hardware to be procured, right? So let's say hardware to be sent. Let's say someone probably wants a printer. So I can add that information. I can say which client it is for, or let's say check boxes or fill the necessary fields and just hit save. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to trigger a lot of automations in the backend, right? Now, let me give some examples of these automations and how this is going to add value to your day. Because on a daily basis, if you have repetitive tasks coming your way, or let's say repetitive tickets, automations are going to take the manual work away, and SuperOps will be able to do most of the things by itself, right? So now let me point out a few of the things. One thing would be, let's say, you can see that as soon as the ticket's created and I've started working on it, the timer will start running on the right side, right? So here I can also add comments, and as and when I'm done working on the ticket, I can log that time. That is one. Second thing is you can see that an automated email is sent out to the client acknowledging that, hey, a ticket's been created, we'll get back to you in so and so time. So those sort of automated emails can be sent. Third, you can see ticket properties being auto-filled or the technician being automatically assigned. You can also see the SLX kicking in on the right side. Now, again, on a day-to-day basis, another thing that would be very useful for a technician is to probably have, let's say, a checklist or some sort of worksheets of sorts that would be useful for them to go through a set of tasks one by one, right? So in SuperOps, how we handle that is by what we call as a runbook, right? So as and when a runbook is assigned to the ticket, on the right-hand side, if I just zoom in here, you'd be able to see Runbook can suggest tasks and also initiate approvals to the client side. So for example, if I go into the task side of things, as a technician, I know that these are some of the tasks I need to be checking off for this specific type of ticket, right? So essentially imagine just breaking down a bigger ticket into smaller tasks, right? So as a technician, I can work on all of them parallelly, and you'll see that each task can also take its own status, right? So I can mark the status of the task as completed. And here on the right-hand side, you can see the progress bar, right? So as and when I'm done with each of these tasks, I can just go ahead and send out a reply to the end user, right? Now, when I'm sending out the reply, you'll see that the runbook will also kick in here and suggest response templates, right? So response templates are again useful in a scenario where you have repetitive questions or requests coming your way, and you have, let's say, a templated response that you want to send out to such cases. So you can make use of reply templates in that sense, and I can just send and set the status of the ticket to resolve in just one go. Right. So in this way, I've handled the incoming ticket, worked on it, and also met my SLAs on time by using these automations. Now, the next step, of course, is to charge the client from this point, right? So one thing is, of course, you can see the timer that is running. So let's say I can add a comment here saying, set up printer for the client, let's say remotely. So I can add that, and I'm adding, let's say, 3 minutes of work. Second thing is I also need to charge the client for the hardware that I'm sending out, correct? So here in SuperOps, within a ticket, you'll have an option to choose from your service catalog of things. So you'll see a list of all the things that's available here. So you can go through the list of service catalog. And right now I'm adding a printer because I'm going to be shipping a printer for them, right? So in the ticket, I tracked the time that I'm working on. I've resolved the ticket, and I've also added a product that's associated with it. Now, the next step in this progression is to make sure that the client is charged for it, right? Because we looked at how reactively things can work, how tickets can come in. And the next part is how I can actually charge the client. So here, let's say if I go into the client, every client will have an invoice audit associated with it, right? So an invoice audit in SuperOps basically refers to any work log that's added on a ticket that needs to be audited or reviewed by the MSP before the client can be charged for that, right? So in this case, you can see the list of all the timers that I've added for this ticket, especially these two that I just added a few minutes back. And if I just scroll further to the right, I'll be able to see what's the quantity, the billable quantity, of course, what's the charge, and if I want to give them a discount, right? So I can make these sort of changes. Let's say instead of, let's say, one billable quantity, right now I'm going to charge them for 2 because I actually spent some more time in working on the setup. So I can make that change and I can just approve this charge. Right now, the moment these charges are approved, it will all go sit under the billing queue in SuperOps, from where the invoice can be generated. Right now, the catch with the billing queue is that there are 2 ways in which the billing queue items can be pushed over to the invoice. One is it can go through a manual invoice, right? That is, let's say you've spent some time doing work and you've shipped off a printer and you want to invoice the client immediately. Then I can just click the plus invoice button at the top right corner. And if I go into this list of services available, I'll be able to see the items present in the billing queue. I can add them, and the invoice is going to get generated, right? Now here, of course, on the invoice, this is pretty much a blank slate as such. So you can see that you can make any edits to it, right? So now when I mean edits here, I'm referring to any sort of details, right? Like, for example, you can see details about the ticket. You can see what sort of ticket I was actually working on, or any comment that was added. what's the billable quantity, the total charge, and if I need to even add an additional discount, for example, I can choose to do that, and then I can save the invoice as a draft. Right now, this is going to generate as a standalone invoice, and this can be sent to the client. The other part, which is also helpful from a billing queue concept, is to automate this invoice creation, right? Because here in SuperOps, you'll see that there's also another tab that says contracts. And contracts is useful in cases where, let's say, you have your managed services clients who pay you, let's say, for example, on a monthly retainer fee, right? So here you can see for this client, these are the bunch of items that they are subscribed to on a monthly manner, right? So in SuperOps, if I probably want to go ahead and add something from the service catalog, I can just go select, let's say if I'm doing a maintenance fee for them for their website once a month, then as a technician or an MSP, I'd be able to go say, I'm going to be charging them $20 for, let's say, one quantity, because let's say one website, I can say I'm charging them monthly. I can, let's say, give a billing start date. You can also go ahead and mention an effective date, meaning that I need the service to start from today. However, I'd like to bill the client only from the first of the next month. But you'll also notice that for the remaining days, the charges will be prorated and shown right on the UI itself. So I can go choose to generate this extra amount as an invoice and just hit save. So what has essentially happened is that the remaining amount has been sent over for invoicing, while the actual cycle will start from the 1st of September, right? Now, that being said, let's say I want to generate these invoices month on month automatically, right? So that's where our invoice settings comes into picture, where I can go ahead and say, generate an invoice, let's say once a month at the first week on a Monday, right? So once I hit save, every month and the beginning of the first week on a Monday, especially, an invoice will get generated based on all the items in the subscriptions that are available. Or even, let's say I've added any items to tickets or any work log on the ticket, all of them will be added and an invoice will be generated, and the invoices can be checked from here. Right now, coming to invoices again, one thing I'd like to call out is the ability to, let's say, generate invoices and have them synced to your accounting tools, right? Because if I just quickly go into a marketplace, you'll see that on the invoice and billing side of things, we integrate with both QuickBooks Online as well as Xero. So with the integration, you can, let's say, import your client list as well as your service catalog. And once you have the recurring subscriptions running, we will sync the invoice to the respective client on QuickBooks Online or Xero automatically. So, and we'll also make sure that the status of the invoices are kept in sync. That is, every time, and let's say an invoice is marked as paid on Xero or QuickBooks, it will be synced to SuperOps for your reference. Finally, we also have an ability to set up payments or collect payments, and we integrate with Stripe for that purpose. So this is powered through our customer portal. So in case, let's say you have requesters using the customer portal, you can also collect their payment information through the portal and also set up, let's say, an auto debit functionality. So as and when an invoice is generated or charge comes up, they'll be automatically charged for that, and you'll be able to see that information here. Now, moving over to the project side of things, in SuperOps, project management, of course, is an unified module. So here I can see the list of all active projects or all the projects I'm working on. Now, this is useful because MSPs charge above and let's say over the monthly fee that they have with their clients, right? Now, using a project to kind of visualize that will help you break down a project into milestones, for example, and have tasks underneath them, which is pretty much what we do in SuperOps, because here you can have, let's say, a project called as onboarding a new client, and you can break down the entire project into smaller milestones or phases, and underneath each milestone, you can have tasks. So I can also switch the project into a Kanban view. So I'll be able to see at this point how many tasks each of my technicians are working on, and I can even drag and drop them from one person to another, just like the ticket screen. Great. So this is the overall, let's say, high-level overview on what we can do on the PSA side of things, which covers the tickets, tasks, projects, as well as client management. And of course, if you have any questions until here, feel free to drop them in the chat or reach out to us and we'll get back to you. Now, moving on to the RMM side of things. So again, on the RMM side of things, as I discussed in the beginning, you'll see that you can perform your alert management, your scripting, patching, as well as IT documentation through SuperOps. And right now with SuperOps, you have the ability to download or set up the agent for both Windows and Mac devices. So once this is downloaded and installed, you will be able to bring in all the information about your assets and basically monitor them, right? Now, the beauty of having an RMM is the proactive element to it, right? So you would be able to easily move between a ticket to an asset or an asset to a ticket and monitor them remotely. So for example, let's say if I go back into my workspace and let's say click on a ticket that I just created, I'll be easily able to move over into an asset from the screen further, right? Because if I go into a ticket based on the requester, I'll be able to see who are the, or let's say which assets are associated. And with just one click, I'll be able to move into that asset. Right now, if I go into the asset, I'll be able to see what's happening with this. And let's say a ticket comes in saying the CPU usage is high, or let's say the memory utilization is quite high, for example, then I'll be able to see real information or real-time information about the asset on the first screen. Right, so the asset screen is designed in such a way that all the necessary information is available at a first glance. Like, for example, what's the current CPU usage like, or who was the last logged in user, as you can see here. Or if I just scroll further down, I can see a lot more default information about the asset. And it is also possible to store custom fields and update them on the fly, like this. Now, this being said, continuing, with the concept of having a ticket coming in and moving into the asset, I'll also be able to do a lot more actions on the asset. Now, that includes, let's say, your terminal. So the live terminal will also allow you to run commands. So it's basically a PowerShell or a command prompt interface from where I would be able to, let's say, just type in a quick query or a command, and I can run them on the asset without the user being notified or disturbed. That is one. Second thing is, if I go into the apps section inside the asset, you will also find the registry editor where you can, go through the keys as such. And similarly, the remote file explorer, where we support all sorts of actions like, being able to copy them, move them, delete, upload. So all those remote actions are possible. That is second. And number three is the script option, right? Because if you are someone who's high on scripts or uses scripts regularly, you can choose one of, let's say, a bunch of default scripts that we give out of the box. Or what you can also do is we give a blank slate where you can write your own scripts, right? Now, let's say you can choose which language you want to write the script in, select how you want to run the script as, also use runtime or placeholder variables, or even deploy custom files on the asset through scripts. That is the second option. And finally, the third option is going to be the community library, right? Because with our community library, you would be able to import or upload your own scripts from and to the library. And whenever needed, you can take in a script into your site. You can make changes to it and have them deployed on your machines as well. And finally, it's the remote access option, because the remote option is going to allow you to take control. Now, again, on the remote side of things, just going into the marketplace, you'll see that we again integrate with TeamViewer, ConnectWise Control, and Splashtop. So here, one thing I'd like to call out is that the Splashtop integration is built in, meaning if you have, let's say, an option where you can just go enable the Splashtop or SuperOps license from our side, and we will be deploying the Splashtop streamer on all your assets, and it comes along with the SuperOps agent itself. Now, going back to the asset, now that we looked at how things can be actioned upon and how it can be reactive in nature, the next one is, of course, going to be the proactive bit where I can set up these policies, right? Now, policies can be set up on groups of assets, or you can set up a policy at a client level, at a site level, and you can even override these values on an asset level, right? So those sort of options are possible. And when it comes to the policies, these are all the options that you can do, as you can see on the left side. Now, if I were to go into intelligent alerting, this is basically the AI element that will be able to read through your data or read through your alert information and understand patterns. And based on the patterns, it will be able to detect an anomaly and create an alert, which is what I've set up here. Similarly, you can also set up alert management conditions. Like for example, whenever the CPU usage is spiking, you can create an alert and also even do an automatic remediation where I can, let's say, do a reboot every time the CPU usage goes high, right? So I can override it this way. The third one is patching. So this is basically OS patching, Windows OS patching, where you can set up a schedule for the patches to go through, set up what sort of categories of patches you want to be deployed, and also set up an approval matrix. Right, so based on how you want these patches to be approved or rejected or manually approved, they will go for installation accordingly. The next one is scheduled actions, which is basically your scripts. But imagine something like, a maintenance script that you probably want to run every fortnightly, or let's say every weekly or every monthly on a group of assets. Then this is how you can set that up. The next one is software management. So software management is basically your third-party application patching or non-Windows patching. And we basically integrate with Chocolatey for that. So we're using their libraries. So what you can do in SuperOps is set up, let's say, a bundle of assets, or let's say a bundle of softwares, and you can choose whether these softwares must be installed and updated or must be uninstalled based on a schedule, right? So I can set that up here, and all of these will again go through a similar schedule. So I can probably say check every once in, let's say, 2 weeks for any updates on a Tuesday. And based on that, every Tuesday, we will check if there's any updates that's available for these applications and have them patched. The next one is the antivirus and data backup integrations. Again, if I just go into our marketplace, you'll be able to see that we integrate with WebRoot and Bitdefender for the AV side of things, and Acronis for the data backup side of things. Now, so if you have an integration or let's say an account with one of these three tools, you can bring that information over, integrate them with SuperOps seamlessly, and manage the assets through the policies itself. So you can basically deploy and manage them through the policies. Now, coming back to the asset, the last point that I want to call out is the IT documentation, right? Now, in SuperOps, we have, again, a unified IT documentation module where you can create these sort of IT document classes, and you can also create individual documents underneath them, right? Like, for example, I've created a class here called as password. Underneath them, I have multiple individual passwords listed. And if I go into a document, you can see that I can also have them linked back to a monitored asset, or even another non-monitored asset for any, let's say, links or any relationships. I can use this mapping. And the idea here is if you go inside a monitored asset, right, any and all information about the asset must be shown on the same screen, because here you can see that any information about the asset, including, the details, apps, policies, tickets, alerts, etc., are all here, and that includes IT documentation as well. So I'll be able to see them with just one glance under this tab for any asset that I go to. And of course, IT documentation can be standalone. That is, you can have information set up for your reference under the IT documentation module, or it can either be linked to a monitored asset, or it can also be linked to a client based on how you'd like to view it. Finally, one last thing before we wrap up the webinar is that in terms of the marketplace integration, you'll see that there are different integrations that we covered. And one thing that I would also like to call out before we wrap up is the Packside integration that we recently built and launched. So using the Packside integration, you will be able to map clients from Packside into SuperOps, and you can start bringing in your subscriptions, right? That is, let's say with Packside, you are provisioning some sort of, let's say, licenses or Microsoft subscriptions to your clients. That will be automatically copied over into SuperOps. You don't have to set them up again. And any change you make in Packside will be reflected in SuperOps. For example, if you're increasing or decreasing a license or changing the value on Packside, we'll make sure that that is reflected on SuperOps. And again, based on the invoice settings, you can generate an invoice for these subscriptions once a month or based on whichever schedule you'd like. With that, we come to the end of the webinar right now. But in case if there were any other questions, you can always reach out to us via email or chat, and we'll be there to help you out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.